So welcome, Mark. It's so good to see you, my friend. And as always, it's Setsi. We begin all things by acknowledging our creator, by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation, all our community elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So, Mark, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers and share a bit about your remarkable work?
Well, thank you, Victor, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. I'm Mark Sevestre. I'm Haudenosaunee Mohawk. I live in the 1784 Haldeman Grant here in Six Nations of the Grand River First Nation in Ontario. I've been working for the last 25 years as the general manager for the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation Community Trust. And through that, one of the founding members of an organization called the National Aboriginal Trust Officers Association, which brought together Indigenous trust funds and those in the service provider community we would deal with, so investment managers, banks, trust companies, lawyers, and accountants. Through that work, we were able to start doing a project in conjunction with an organization called Share Canada, called the Reconciliation Responsible Investment Initiative. So anything that I've been known for lately has been through that work, and it's really what that work does was it helps Indigenous communities understand the connection between their traditional cultural values and their investment policy. And also to helping Canadians who are interested in having their invested funds work better for Indigenous peoples as well. So implementing reconciliation into their portfolios. So that's been quite some exciting work. It's been very well received, I think, over the last number of years. There's a couple of other things that I do. I'm also a trustee on a First Nation trust fund out in northern New Brunswick, and I'm on the board of regents for Mount Allison University, where I went to school, and as you may see, played football, and very proud Mountie in that way too. And I'm also on an advisory board for an organization out of the United States called First Peoples Worldwide, and currently that's housed at the University of Colorado in Boulder. So we're very excited to be able to bring forward Indigenous investing principles and having those discussions with those who are interested in finding out how our investment can play a role in helping companies better work with Indigenous communities.
That's truly remarkable. And as the old adage goes, if you want to get something done, give it to the busiest people. My goodness, you're doing some great work across
Thank
many
you.
regions. I can't even imagine the amount of lives that your work impacts. So once again, I appreciate you. You represent so much of the good in this world. So thank you. Thank you.
Well,
So my
thank you.
next question
Appreciate
is,
that.
what inspires you in your current work? What has you curious right now?
I think a lot of times in a lot of the work that I've done, it's that nobody was doing it, and there was a need and a vacuum out there. When I first started my role as a trust manager, First Nation trust manager, there was not any kind of organization or network that we could reach out to and say, how are you doing this, or how are you setting these things up? Fortunately, I had a background with a Bachelor of Commerce degree from Mount Allison. I've worked for the federal government in Indigenous affairs. I've also worked in economic development. And prior to taking the role on as a trust manager, I was a bank manager with Bank of Montreal. So a lot of those roles I had kind of, really helped fall into place when this role came along, and really kind of recreate that role and sort of formalize some structure around it, because I was hired by a group of community trustees who needed a general manager to ensure that the trust agreement we operate under, they're following, and we're following it, and really it didn't tell you how to put together an office and how to put together an organization to fulfill the goals of that trust agreement. And really what we're supposed to be doing in that case is taking a capital amount that was part of a land claim settlement, investing it into the publicly traded markets, and then the revenue you generate off of those investments you are allowed to utilize for community projects. So our trust board evaluates proposals that are brought forward by the First Nation, and we can fund them. So since 1999, when I started, we grew the fund from about $13 million to over $26 million today. And at the same time, we funded about $8 million worth of projects. So anything from water lines to heritage, language, health, and education is a big one for the community. We set up we call it a graduation award. So any student from that community who graduates from grade 8, high school, college, university, or any kind of post-secondary institution gets a monetary award and a certificate signed by our organization of congratulations. And those are just sort of the simple things. We built a house each in the last couple of years. So really working towards addressing some of the needs within a First Nation community that are critical. So I think for me, just being able to meet those needs of a community, for example, then taking that example and sharing it either nationally or internationally. I've had great discussions with Indigenous folks from South Africa and from South America, in the United States as well, Australia, New Zealand. It's really been quite an eye-opening experience of what we're doing here in Canada and how that could be helpful to other communities around the world, which, and I think that's really what keeps me going on this, is that it's been, it's exciting, and you see that you're contributing to positive change, in my mind.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Thank you so much for all that context and showing that there is a global ecosystem around how capital can be used as a contributor as opposed to an extractive force. Truly remarkable. Thank you so much. So my next question is, what challenges and barriers do you face in your work, and how are you and your colleagues working to overcome some of these challenges and barriers?
Well, that was really the reason why we started NATOA in the first place, is just to share stories and share experiences, because, like I said, there was no mechanism for that to happen. And I think once we started sharing a lot of the stories, and this goes back to a lot of the culture of the Indigenous peoples in, really around the world anyway, but here in Canada, it's sharing our stories and sharing our experiences. If we know something, we have to share it so that somebody else won't have to go through any kind of the hardships or suffering. There's a lot of solutions that have come out of a lot of the discussions we've had. And so, we really wanted to make sure that getting that word out is incredibly helpful. Early on, for example, when the trust settlement came into place that I'm managing, really the government says, well, we don't want you squandering this money we're giving you. And so you have to take the capital and put it into the publicly traded markets. And then in that case, you have to find investment managers who'll do that. And early on, they're just saying, okay, give us your money, we'll take care of it for you. And, when we really started asking the questions, well, who's looking out for our rights and our title and our interest? Are we investing in companies that may be doing harm to our community or other communities? Do our investments, meet the values that our communities are built upon? As a lot of Indigenous communities have traditional and cultural values that have been long practiced, and we really realize that they should be reflected in our investment values, because if we're not investing with our values, we're investing with the values of the investment management community that we're dealing with. And what we've really know is that very, very few of those investment managers are Indigenous. And so that's one of the things we're trying to highlight for our youth, is there's careers in these areas of finance that are exciting and beneficial and very underrepresented. So we are trying to open our youth eyes for those opportunities by investing in a way that they can see, that they can contribute to. So, I think that's, and I think is in your question, one of the barriers is that are developing the knowledge and experience to be able to push back with our managers and push back to those who are providing us services, because essentially we're hiring them for their expertise, but they're saying, don't worry, sit back, don't worry, we'll take care of it for you. But really they're taking care of it in the way they see the world. And it's really, it was incumbent upon us to try to ensure that they understood who we were. We hired a new investment manager a couple of years ago, and there's a form that every financial expert, every manager has to provide you. It's called Know Your Client. But really all they were asking for is, how much money do you have? How long are you going to invest it for? What are some of your risk tolerances? And how much do you need to take it out on an annual basis? And I kept trying to tell them the Mississauga people are people who believe, and they kept telling me, that doesn't belong there. That doesn't belong there. So I said, how the heck do you even know who we are if you're not listening to us when we tell you? So I think what we did was we revised our investment policy to include the values of this community. Here's who we are. Here's how we see things. And it really gave them a lot of guidance in terms of what types of companies we wanted in our portfolio. And as we've developed and built the capacity, we're actually engaging outwardly with these companies in a way to say, we want you to develop Indigenous policy. We want you to look for and report back to us on processes for recruitment and retention of Indigenous peoples. We want you to provide education to your current workforce on Indigenous history. So all the things that are wrapped up in the Truth and Reconciliation's call to Action 92 about business and how it can play a role, we're asking of these companies. And through this process, we've had some pretty good success with some pretty high profile companies in the Canadian economy. And so when I go back to the community and say, this is what we've done with these shares that we own, they're all pretty happy and pretty impressed that we were able to do that.
That's truly remarkable and unfortunate as well. That paternalistic model of we're going to tell you what to do with the capital, I think is is the whole problem around imperialism and colonialism. But I think what's remarkable is your response, the fact that you're able to build investment theses, investment values, investment policies that centered the values and sentiments of your community. So once again, I applaud your visionary leadership and the work that you and your colleagues are doing. It's truly remarkable. So it's a perfect segue to my next question. How do you feel about the future of Indigenous fund managers? How do you feel about the Indigenous of culturally appropriate capital?
Well, I think we're starting to go down a path where it's well understood that if you're coming in to provide a service to an Indigenous community, you better be willing to sit back and learn about who they are as a people, what motivates them, and two, we recognize they're looking for direction from us, and so the culture and traditional values that have we've practiced and lived undertaking, and how we managed our wealth, because we really looked at it as money is just another version of wealth. We were managing wealth in terms of the resources and the natural resources that we've got. We know that we needed to eat today, we needed to eat next week, and we needed to eat 2 months from now and a year from now, and we take that philosophy and apply it to our finances and our money. It really helps people understand that, yes, we've got short-term, mid-term, long-term goals that we need to do. And then based on our culture and our tradition and our values, we share that with our managers to say that, here's how we like that money invested. My trustees would look at it and say, we have to be proud of where our money comes from. And, we've got this responsibility that, through a land claim settlement in this case, that we were able to secure this type of wealth. Let's make sure we do something positive with it. And I think that that's the premise that we're operating under, and then sharing that throughout the network we've got with other investment Indigenous investors across Canada and across the United States and the world. We're happy to show that and use that as a model to be able to say that this is how we move it forward. This is how then we can provide that leadership, because we're tired of having government or other groups do something for us. And the statement of nothing about us without us, really rings true in this case. And we're really stepping up and saying that, in this case, this is how we see it going. And, if you want our business, this is how it operates.
Ashe, ashe, ashe. I couldn't agree more. So my last question, do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action for our listeners and our viewers?
Well, in this case, and I think a lot of times people will, we talk about reconciliation here in Canada, and we've got a lot of opportunity based on, a lot of the truth that's coming out, based on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We've been doing this work since 2016 and operating in a way that, we're trying to incorporate values, and we're trying to, provide understanding of the need and why reconciliation is important. Sadly, it wasn't until the discovery of the bodies of the children in Kamloops in British Columbia that Canadians really opened up their eyes. I mean, there's a lot that understood that and recognized that it was an issue, but generally, nationwide, that was an eye-opening, awakening moment, and a lot of companies. In our case, we're working with the corporate world. A lot of companies agreed that they needed to do better. They needed to be part of the solution. So, in our work, we are trying to open the doors for Indigenous business, Indigenous employees. And, people have said, well, this is a big ask. Where do I start? And I said, easiest thing to do is make a friend who's Indigenous, ask questions. Don't be afraid that you might insult them. Sometimes it's hard to be a lot of people's only Indigenous friend, but, if they're asking the question, they want to know. And I think it's important to be able to share and, bring them along. I've, some of the board work I do for the university I'm on a board with is having those discussions. It's okay to ask the question. It's okay to seek out somebody who you've learned from or met or just met. A lot of times when I do a presentation, next thing I know, on LinkedIn, I have 3 or 4 more connection requests, and that like today, this has led to a conversation here that could be very powerful for somebody who's looking where they want to start.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. So, Mark, I so appreciate all that you do for so many. I appreciate your leadership, your candor, and all that you share and all the wisdom that you've deployed. Yeah, it's remarkable. And once again, I just give thanks that you're able to, one, contribute your voice, contributes the wisdom, guidance, and the truth that needs to be said, especially around the flows of capital in the context of Canada right now and capital markets globally that are very troublesome in many regards. So once again, I give thanks for all that you are, that you represent well. And as always at Setsi, we close the way we began, by acknowledging our creator, by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Thank you so much, Mark. I so appreciate you.
Well, thank you for doing what you're doing. And anytime we, talk about a land acknowledgement, it's not just talking about the past and who was here, but it's really conveying a responsibility on all of us to make those kind of decisions moving forward, so future generations can thrive the way we have. And so it's all in the sharing. So I appreciate the opportunity and thank you for what you do.
Ashe, ashe. But I appreciate you.